Hi and welcome. In this week's video, we're going to be looking at how we can build this carousel right here with vanilla JavaScript. We're going to be starting from nothing, a blank HTML file. We're going to style it up and then we're going to do the JavaScript to build it out. So here we have the arrows. We can navigate that way and this way. We have our dot navigation thingy down here, so we can click on those. If we get to the end of it, the arrow here disappears, or if we get to the end on the other side, the arrow there disappears. And all of this would work no matter how many slides you have. Hi there and welcome back to my channel. It's a new year. It is 2019. This is my first video of 2019 and it's a week earlier than I planned on doing, but there's a special reason for that I'm going to get to in a second. What we're going to be doing in this one, we're not going to be making it functional just yet. We're not going to be doing all the really fun stuff. We're just going to be doing the HTML and the CSS because it was a really long video. If not, it turned into almost 2 hours and that's too long for a video in my books. You don't want to stick around for that long. So this one is quite a bit shorter. Do all the markup and all of the CSS, and then in the next video we're going to go and tackle the JavaScript itself. That one's still a long one, but it's a little bit more manageable that way. So they're both out now, so if you just want to skip to the JavaScript because you're pretty good with HTML and CSS, you can, even though this video will affect how I'm writing that JavaScript. So just so you're aware of that, it is, some of the stuff, the way I'm organizing my styles and the way I'm organizing my markup does affect the JavaScript a little bit. So if I suggest you stick around for both, but if you really want to jump into the next one, it is up now. It's ready to go. There's no waiting a week or anything like that, like I usually do for my next video. But yeah, it should be a good video. I hope you're going to like it. But the reason it's a special video and the reason I'm doing it early is because I'm actually doing it to promote something, but it's not a paid promotion. I'm just doing this because it's something that I really think is worth promoting. And that is Zell's course. So Zell has opened up his JavaScript course. He only does it, I don't remember, it's every 6 months, but it's not all the time because it's still a work in progress, but it's really fully built out now, or not fully, but there's a lot of content in there now, like a lot of content. So I am a student of his course. I joined up way back when he was, I think, first opening it. And I learned a lot by this course and it changed how I see JavaScript. And I'm here to, I get lots of people asking me about JavaScript and making videos on JavaScript, and I will be doing more of them just like I am today, but I wouldn't be able to if it wasn't for this course. So I felt that it's opening up for, I think, as of recording, I think it's like 8 more days. We're going to look at, there we go, 9 more days, and by the time this is up, probably 7 or 8 more days. So I just wanted to let people know about it because it really was a game changer for me in how I approach JavaScript, and I think it could be a game changer for you on how you approach it because JavaScript is overwhelming compared to a lot of learning HTML and CSS. You'll see the pricing on it is kind of expensive, but you're getting a lot of content for it. So there's the starter pack or the mastery pack. If you're going for the mastery one at $500, it's probably too much for a lot of people, and if it is, that's fine. But if you are really looking to learn JavaScript and it's something you think you can afford, the 20 components and the lessons for it are really good. And the way they do it, the way he approaches learning JavaScript is no fizz buzz and no weird concepts. It's about learning things that are practical and applying them in practical ways and really learning step by step and not skipping stuff along the way. And I really learned a lot by not only on JavaScript, but just how to approach teaching really heavy topics or very in-depth topics through following his course as well. So I really think for me, it was good enough that I'm very glad to freely promote it to my audience. And I think you should think about joining, but if you're on the fence or you're going, holy crap, that's a lot of money, this is one of his components. Now, I'm not building it exactly the same way he did. I've sort of taken my own twist. I haven't actually pushed it as far as he pushes it in terms of optimizing it, but we get most of the way there. I couldn't make the video longer than it already is. So this video gives you a little taste of what you can find in his course if you're a little bit on the fence. And of course, if you're just looking at how to do the slider and you don't care about his course at all, I'm not going to talk about it again until the end. So let's just jump right into it. Okay, so here we are with our blank page with nothing at all on it, and we're going to start doing our carousel. I'm not going to do too much, but I will be using Emmet to write my HTML just because it's a little bit faster. If you've never used Emmet, you can get it very easily. as an extension, or if you're using VS Code like me, it is included. So that's nice and handy. And the way Emmet works is if you want a div, you can just do .carousel and then push tab on your keyboard and it will autocomplete it for you. And if you need something like a button, which we're going to need now, I can write button dot and then carousel button, let's say, and hit tab, and it's going to give me that class. And we're actually going to need 2 buttons. So I'm going to copy that one and paste it in because we will need 2. I'm also using live server right now. So if I save that, you can see that automatically this refreshes and my 2 buttons are there. So anytime I hit save, it will be refreshing automatically. That's live server, which is an extension on VS Code, but there's many other ways of doing that. And I'll include a link to that in the description below, as well as some links to some other, a video I have on other ways you can do the same thing. Great. So for our carousel, well, we have our div here that's going to be our main carousel, and we're going to have our 2 buttons inside, which is going to be our left and right navigation buttons. And then we need the carousel itself. So let's come in the middle here, and we're going to give ourselves a div. So we're going to do a carousel track container, let's call it. So you'll notice I'm doing double underscores. Is just so I'm in my carousels. These are elements that are living inside of my carousel. So it just makes the naming of things, if it's a single hyphen will denote that the track container is one word. The double underscore is like it's a track container that's part of my carousel. So then we need our slides. But for our slides, what we're going to do is we're actually going to have a UL, and I'm going to call this one carousel track. So I'll hit tab on there again. So we have my carousel track itself, which is a list, and it's quite common. You'll see carousels done as lists. It could be just like a set of divs for all of your slides, but doing it as a list makes sense when you're thinking about accessibility and all of that, because of usually the type of content that's in there. I think a list actually does make the most sense. So if it's a list, then we need our list items, and I'll call each one of these a carousel slide, because I think that makes sense. And I can do *3 and hit tab, and it pumps it out just like that. Now, if you don't know Emmet, and this is the first time you're seeing it, we could actually do all of this with one stroke and then hit tab, or one set of typing out, but I'm going to keep it pretty basic for now, just for simplicity's sake. And on each one of my slides, I'm going to throw an image in here. Now, for my images that I'm putting in here, we could put them we could actually have a link in here, and then so each carousel item would be clickable. We could put text with an image. We could put no image, just text, and then have the images as background images. There's many different ways you could approach this. I'm just going to do it as an image inside for the demo purposes, so we're not getting too into the main focus of this is the JavaScript itself. So I want to do something really simple. So we're going to do just a regular old image. So I'm undoing there just a little bit because I can come in all 3 of these and do it at the same time. So I'm just pushing Control on my keyboard while I'm clicking, or you could do a command and place your cursor in multiple places at the same time, which is always handy. Image src, and I'm going to go into my image folder, which I've already done, and you can see here I do have some images already in there. So I'm just going to put slide 1 for the time being, and I'll put a blank alt on there. And yeah, so that's going to be my slides, but obviously this will be number 2, and this one here will be number 3. And I'll hit save, and we should see some images come in there. So there's my 3 slides that we're going to be using. Cool. For my buttons themselves, we want those to be clickable. So I guess I should put some content in here. So this is my carousel button, and on this one, I'm going to be putting, they're SVGs, but I'm just going to do an image, and I'll do we'll do a class on these 2 class of, no, we won't do a class. We'll just do an image, image, src. And my source here again will be in my image folder. Left should be my first one. I can copy all that, bring that down into this button, and that will be my right. Because these are SVGs, I'm going to save that, but we'll see they don't actually appear yet. With my CSS, I'm going to have to give those a bit more of a size, because right now nothing is actually showing up in there, but I have my 2 buttons. And the last thing we're going to want in my markup here is sort of like, so right now I have my button to go to the left, I have a button to go to the right. I have my 3 slides, and I want one last thing, which is going to be like the little, those indicators you get that say like you're on slide 2 of 3 or slide 3 of 7 or whatever it is. So we're going to give ourselves some indicators. So I'll come down after this button, and this would just be a div, and we'll call it carousel nav, because I think that makes sense, where it's our navigation for our carousel. And each one of these is going to be a button. So I'm going to do button with a class of carousel. We'll call it indicator, because it's an indicator of what slide we're on. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And we're going to need 3 of those. So times 3. And I can hit save. I don't actually, I won't have any content in these. They're going to be blank. So right now we don't see much, but with some CSS, we'll style those so they actually show up a little bit more. So as far as the markup, I think that's it. We're going to be jumping back in here to add a couple of classes at one point, but I think for the most part, that's all we really need to have in here. So we have our main carousel container that's going to hold, or our main carousel div that's holding everything. We have our left and right buttons, and actually I'm going to add that on here because we're going to need those to say what direction we're going in. So I'll call it carousel. You know, I could, if I'm really doing them, I could do like button left like that. So it's a modifier to go left, but I think I'm just going to do, you know what, we'll do it the proper way. I was going to come back on that, but why not? If we're using them, we might as well go all out. So the double hyphen is indicating that it's a modifier of the actual carousel button. No, I'm not going to do that because I'm not using this for CSS purposes. Yeah, I need to use this anyway to get my buttons where I want them to be. So yeah, we're going to leave it like that. So this is my double hyphen is indicating that it's a modifier, and the reason that we have a double hyphen is it's showing a difference between here track container is like a single word, but we're just using that instead of a space because we don't have spaces in class names. So track container has a single hyphen. This is indicating it's not, you know, button right. It is my carousel button, but I'm adding a few extra little things on it. So I'm modifying my original carousel button to place it on the right or the left. And we'll also be using that to select it in our JavaScript. Cool, so let's save that. And all of that is done. So now we're going to move on to our CSS, which shouldn't take us too long, but I'm going to make a new folder and call it CSS. And in there we can make a new file called style.css. Call it whatever you want, but I'm going to go with style.css. And I'll go back here, and before I do any work, let's link that up, css/style.css. Cool, so CSS. We're going to start just with our carousel, and I'm going to give this a position relative. I don't know if we need it, but I'm going to put it on there anyway. Height, I'm just doing 600 pixels because it's for demo purposes, but if you have a different one that you want, go for it. And I'm going to give it a width of 80%. Just to limit the overall size. We'll give it a margin of 0 auto, just stick it in the middle. And I think that's about it for the moment. My pictures are too big. Should I call those carousel images? I'm going to call them carousel images with a class name. I wasn't going to put a class on them, but we'll give them a class. Class equals carousel images. Image would make more sense. And we'll just do this really fast. Carousel image will be a width of 100% for now. I'm going to be coming back on the image a little bit afterwards, but for the moment that should be fine. Good. So now let's move on to our carousel track container. Some long names in here. It's kind of annoying, but we'll make do. I'm going to give this a background of light green just so we can see it. And padding for the moment. Padding, this will come off, but just for demo purposes, I like giving things color. So we can see that all my images are inside of there by default. So, whoops, this should be padding, not passing. There we go. That makes more sense. And right away we can see that there's some issues with the spacing on everything here. So that's because of my carousel track is my UL, right? So padding of 0, margin of 0, and list style of none. There we go. So now my images are fitting in there a little bit better. Now I'm going to look at the images, not the images, but the slides themselves. So carousel slide, just because we need these to be a position of absolute, so they actually stack on top of each other for now. That will change once we get into the JavaScript. Bottom of 0, and we'll do a width of 100%, should work fine. There we go. So they're all stacking on top of each other, but there's a problem. See the little green thing I had before? It's not really doing what I want it to do because these are position absolute. So I'm actually going to give my track container a height of 100%, so now my track container is the height of this 600 pixels, so that's good. But my images aren't really positioned in there properly, so this probably also needs a position of relative. There we go. So now it's this is relatively placed inside of there, and now if I take off my padding, we get rid of that issue of it sticking off the side a little bit. Now the one problem I still have is my image isn't as tall as my track container, because I said this is 600 pixels and I said that my image has a width of 100%, so the width is matching and that means the height isn't quite there. So I'm actually going to give this also a height of 100%, and this image isn't the most obvious one, but when I do that it's stretching the image out. If this was someone's face, you'd really see it. They'd get really skinny all of a sudden. And we don't want that to happen, obviously, so what we can also do here is an object fit cover. I do have another video on object fit cover. There should be a card popping up now it's like 5 minutes long that explains how that works if you've never seen it before. And the nice thing with object fit cover is what it's actually going to do, and we'll see it now as I grow this, it's cropping my picture. So it's a lot like background size cover, but for actual images. So that can be really handy little trick if you didn't know about it already. It should be a JS video, but we can throw some CSS fun stuff in there while we're at it. So we need to position my buttons so that they're on the left and the right, and we want these to actually look like something now. So we'll start with the buttons. I think I'm just hoping I'm not forgetting anything, but I think we're good along here. So I have my slide, so now we can do carousel button. So for my carousel button, again, we're going to want to position absolute. And then this time I'm going to do a top of 50% because I want it to be in the middle. Now the only problem when I do that is it's not actually going to the middle, it's putting the top of my button at the middle. And just to really illustrate this, I'm going to turn this off in a second, but say I give it a height of 200 pixels. So now you can really see that it's the middle that's sitting at the 50% because it's stretching all the way down. So the easy fix for this is to then do a transform, translate, in this case I want Y because Y is up and down, and negative 50%. Because I'm moving it 50% down the height of its parent, but then this is moving it on its own size. So it's going to take half of its size and move it up by that. So now it's positioned perfectly in the middle, and now I can take my height off and we're good. Since we're here, normally I don't work this way. I like having, I don't like nesting for certain things, but I'm going to be lazy on this one. So this is for those SVGs that I put in. Let's give those a width of like 20 pixels so we can actually see, and that's way too big. Maybe even half that, a little bit bigger. We'll go with that and we'll play around with it a little bit. Back to the button here, we want to give this a background of transparent and a border of 0 because buttons always have those borders on them. And now I can barely see that it's even there. So one thing that's really important to do in general, I'm going to put my buttons out on the sides instead of having them on top of my image. If all of your images are really white, there's ways of doing it, but you want to make sure that the button, I could make like a big div here that sort of lightens it so we can always see it, but I'm just going to move my buttons out to the side for this one. And that's where my carousel button left comes in, because this is my modifier. So it's using all of these styles, but the left of it, I think, is going to be negative 15 pixels. Oh, need more than that. I'll go a little bit more. 30? 50. We'll get there eventually. Probably too much now. I'll stick with 40 for now. So it's sticking out the side there, and the last thing we want to make sure that it's obvious that it's clickable, because it's not very obvious right now. So I'm going to do my cursor as pointer. And now at least when I go on top, I get my little hand icon there. And here we're going to take my carousel button right, and we can do a right of negative 40 pixels. And then it's going to stick off on the right side. So we have my two buttons that we can see and click on now. So that's perfect, and we'll eventually, with some JavaScript, make that actually work. So the last thing we need to style up, I believe, is my little indicators here. So let's come down here, and that was my carousel little indicator. So actually, I'm going to do my carousel nav. Let's give it a red background just so we can really see what's happening here. Or I'll do pink because pink's a little less offensive. So we can see that the nav itself is stretching the full size, even though my buttons are only there. And we'll also do carousel indicator. I'm just going to do a few things here really fast. We'll scroll down so it's a bit easier for you to see. Border 0 and a border radius of 50% to make them into circles with a width of 20 pixels, height of 20 pixels, and I'm going to do a background of black for the second. We'll change that, but there we go, we can see them. They're probably a bit too big. Maybe bring that down to 15. Okay, but I want those to be in the middle. So the only reason I added this, well, I wanted to get there eventually, but up on here, I'm going to do a display of flex, which doesn't change much until I do my justify content, and we'll do a center on it so we can bang it in the middle. And then I guess in here we could add a bit of padding of 10 pixels 0, and these will need a bit of margin of 0, 15 pixels maybe. Might be a bit too much, 12, 10, something like that. Anyway, I think that should look okay. I'm going to change this from black to an RGB that's black, 0, 0, 0, and we'll go with like a 0.3. Of course, now we don't need our pink background on there anymore. So I think that'd be pretty good, and I'm going to come back to my HTML file for a second because I want to have a current slide. So we're indicating which one is the current slide on my indicators here. And so that means when we have my carousel indicator, which is also a current slide, and this is where we could use a modifier class and all that, but I'm going to do a background of RGBA 0.75 or something like that. So the current one is much darker than the other one. So if we click here to switch, it's going to show us. Or if I click on those, that darker color is following us along to act as navigation and let us know what slide number we're on. And that's it for our markup and for the styling of it all. So the CSS is done. The next video is where the real bread and butter is. It is up now, so you can go and check it out without any hesitation. I did think it was important to break them up just to make not one like 2-hour long video, but I look forward to seeing you over there when you're ready to go and tackle the JavaScript.